let's go ahead and get started. It's my records reflect 2:01, so allow me to welcome all of you to the Student Success Completion Committee meeting here for October. We have a very full agenda with some really meaty topics today, and so I appreciate all of you participating via the teams. And let's get right started with presentations. As you know, enrollment has been a real challenge across the country this year, and Ball State has really put forth some extraordinary enrollment numbers. And as a result, we thought, well, maybe they've got a secret or something that we can all learn from that. And so we've asked Ball State to help us just kind of highlight their success and some of the things that they have done to ensure that enrollment number remained as solid as it is. So we have Dr. Rivera Mills here that's going to kind of share some ideas with us and some of the best practices that they have been utilizing to achieve those results. So with that, Dr. Rivera Mills, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you and the committee. And thank you for the opportunity that I have here to share with you some of our retention efforts. Can everybody hear me okay?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I assume, Sam, you're moving these forward. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first slide. And as you can see from this chart, what you're seeing is the last 10 years of our retention rates. Specifically, one of the things that concerned us was a 4-year decline in our retention rates, particularly with our freshman cohort beginning in 2015. However, as you will see, thanks to our very focused efforts, I am pleased to share that the fall 2019 cohort retention rate is 81%, which represents a 6% increase from the previous fall 2018 cohort and ties our university's highest retention rates, which occurred in 2013 and 2014. In the next slide, what you will see is that not only have we been able to increase our retention rate, but we have also decreased the opportunity gap for underrepresented student populations. So in this chart, we have been able to improve our rates over the last 3 years for our Black, Latinx, and Asian students. On the left side, moving to the right, you can see that Black students in the 2019 cohort were retained at 78% compared to 66% the previous year, the 2018 cohort, which is a 12% increase in the retention rate and a 6% increase compared to the 2017 cohort. Our Latinx students in the 2019 cohort were retained at 79%, which represents a 10% increase in the retention rate compared to 2018. And our Asian students show a 12% increase in retention rates from the 2018 cohort and an 11% increase from the 2017 cohort. We had seen a decline in the retention of our Asian students over the past 2 years, so we are very happy to see a reversal in that trend. Now, despite what you see here, we still have some work to do to be able to equalize our student success, but we're certainly seeing some improvements this far that make us very hopeful. In the next slide, what you see here is also an increase in the retention rates of 21st century scholars, particularly looking at 2016 to 2019. You can see that we experienced a 9% increase compared to 2018, and we're very pleased with that. It is the highest it has been in the last 5 years for us. And in the next slide, you will see a similar trend that is true for retention rates of commuter students. Here, the 2019 cohort retention rate is 75%, which is a 10% increase compared to the 2018 cohort, where we saw a very steep decline in the retention rate of these students. Now, in terms of, as we go to the next slide, what you will see are some of the efforts that we have put in place to try to reverse some of the trends that we were seeing. These improvements are really a result of very focused efforts in several areas. We know that student success is really a campus-wide effort. So one of the things we did right away was to really engage our faculty in these efforts. We created a toolkit and we focused them on engaging students, particularly in the first. When we looked at our data and we saw when students were making those critical decisions about whether to drop out or to continue, we noticed that it was happening within the first 6 weeks of the fall semester. So we wanted to make sure to address that very actively through this toolkit. We also launched a campaign for first generation college students. We called it the I Am First Generation campaign. And that was also very successful in helping those students accommodate and feel that sense of belonging as soon as they arrived at our campus. In addition, we also had many efforts around proactive advising. Our advisors have embraced all the tools that are available to them, including a recently acquired predictive analytics platform. And that allows them to do much more than just help students schedule their classes. Advisors are able to maintain consistent connections with their students throughout the year, and they really become that central resource and that point of reference that they can go to at any time. We also looked at our registration holds and did an audit. Our audit revealed that there was a university business practice where registration holds were being used as an accountability measure for many, many things. And so now we have narrowed down the use of registration holds to only the most critical business related functions where a hold on a registration makes sense and is appropriate. And that eliminated many barriers that our students were finding. And then our student success platform, which is that predictive analytics platform that I had just mentioned called Aviso, allowed us to use data analytics to really identify and intervene with students who might be at higher risk of not being successful. Academic advisors and retention staff can monitor our student engagement and intervene early so that students have an opportunity to turn things around. And then finally, we did increase our support for 21st century scholars, focusing on interventions, outreach, making sure that they were aware of the resources that were available to them, particularly focusing on students of color that were 21st century scholars. And we also increased our support for our commuter students by reducing the number of commuter students that had been assigned to our undergraduate commuter ambassadors. And we also developed more internal guidance for people to know how to best engage with our commuter students. So these were some of the actions that we took on right away.
Great. The Aviso, is that an internal program or is that a third party?
It's a third party. It's a third party predictive analytics platform.
I see. Okay. And how many years have you, how long have you had that in place?
This is the second year.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So as we go to the next slide, we also want to focus on the fact that not only are we doing a lot for our incoming freshman students, but we're also focusing on making sure that there's returning student engagement. So we wanted to make sure that our returning students were being supported, making sure that we were reaching out to students who we noticed had not registered for fall yet. We wanted to make sure that they were registered, or the research shows that the earlier a student registers for the following semester, the more likely they are to persist. Also, during the pandemic, we broadened our credit, no credit policy where appropriate to make sure that students weren't being penalized for circumstances that were clearly beyond their control. And in addition, students received very personalized communication from a number of areas across campus that we felt would have a better connection to the student who may not otherwise respond. And this really helped us to move away from a type of communication that was more a one-size-fits-all. We really thought, who would the student respond to best given the relationship that they had built with that professional or that faculty member. And then that served us to develop a detailed communication plan that would then also help students prepare for a different kind of fall due to the pandemic, particularly this year. Mm-hmm. Let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Besides these short-term efforts that happen within the first 6 weeks of the term, we are now very excited about the fact that we have received a Lilly Endowment grant of $2.5 million. Most of what I've shared with you has been short-term, but now we're looking at some midterm goals. And this endowment will really provide us with the a first-year experience that is very comprehensive. The first-year experience will involve these components that you see here. We're going to do an extensive review and expansion of our summer orientation and welcome week, as well as an expansion of summer bridge programs. We want to develop first-year experience seminars that will engage all of the incoming freshman class. We are looking at redesigning our living and learning communities in the residence halls. We want to continue to advance that proactive academic advising that really helps students connect to the resources available across campus. And we want to expand the academic support that we're offering, particularly through our learning center, things like tutoring and supplementation and coaching, so that students feel very well supported in their academic endeavors. We're also going to develop a set of peer mentors that will be assigned. These will be more of the junior, senior students being assigned to freshman students. And then we're going to launch an extensive marketing communications campaign for first year experience to make sure that students are aware of what's available for them. And then in the next slide, I want to bring your attention to more long-term systemic changes. We are really making sure, again, that this is an all hands on deck approach and that we have in place the systems that can help us support some of the more focused interventions that I've mentioned to you already. So as far as systemic changes, we would like to create a set of one-stop shops that are near each other so that students can really get to the resources they need quickly. Currently, we have a lot of student support, but it tends to be sprinkled throughout campus. So we want to be able to co-locate some of these offices so that a student can go to one building and know that as soon as they're admitted, they can get everything they need from the moment they're admitted to that first enrollment in the fall. We want to make sure that we're leveraging our technology solutions, that the technology tools that we're using are not redundant, that people have what they need, whether they're faculty or advisors, that the systems speak to each other and they're integrated. All of that is happening and it's being assessed right now. We're also looking at mobile technology and how can we make things more accessible through an app that students can access right from their phones. And in addition, we're looking at data analytics. We are in the middle of doing an audit of our data analytics systems to make sure that we have the data that we need to inform many of these interventions and decisions that we're making about student success. We're going to continue to work on that proactive advising model. Some people call it intrusive advising model, that moves away from waiting for the student to arrive at the advisor's door and ask for help. And we're very, very proactive about reaching out to students at key points in time that we have identified as being those critical decision moments for students. And then we're looking at financial interventions and how can we leverage existing funds to make sure that students have access to micro grants that might get them through a difficult time, whether they can't afford books or they have an emergency that happens or they need just that slight extra help to get them to the finish line to graduation. We want to make sure that these small amounts of money are available to them when they need that. And then finally, our last slide, I just wanted to remind you of the Ball State mission. All of these efforts really feed into our vision to make sure that we're empowering our graduates to have fulfilling careers and meaningful lives enriched by lifelong learning. We want to make sure that every student that comes into Ball State really can fulfill their educational goals and that they are finding the resources and the support that they need to make it through. So again, we're excited to see the significant improvement that we've made over the last year, but by no means are we sitting back and taking this for granted. We know that there's a lot going on in our students' lives, let alone the pandemic, and we want to make sure that the efforts that we have started are sustained and that we build on those for the future. Okay. So let me stop there and ask if I can answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Questions? I'll start with talk a little bit about the how you have targeted the initiatives. You know, obviously there's a large cohort of your people, are going to be very successful regardless. But how do you identify the ones that are really greatest at risk and put your resources to that group?
Part of the way we do that is by looking at our data. So we look at several key indicators that let us know whether a student is really engaging with our campus or not. And they come from different systems. One of them is our learning management system, where we can see, is a student attending class regularly? Is a student participating in the assignments that they're supposed to be turning in? From the student affairs side, we'll look at, is a student attending certain organized events across campus? Are they taking care of themselves in terms of health and wellness in the residence halls? We connect with the resident directors. And then our advisors have set appointments where they expect students to come in to talk about certain things. If you have a student that's missing one of those appointments, we reach out to them and make sure that they're okay, that there isn't anything else that they need. We also take opportunities when, for example, if we were to facilitate a small grant for a student who has indicated that they need some financial assistance, and maybe we give them $500. We don't just give them the money, but we take that opportunity to check in on other areas of that student's life to see if there are any other barriers or challenges that they're facing that we might need to intervene in. And then more than anything, this platform, this analytics platform, we uploaded an incredible amount of data over the last 10 years that shows trends in what helps students succeed. So the platform itself has a way of determining what those success indicators look like. And when a student is falling outside of those trends, it will flag a student so that an advisor can then follow up with that particular student and just check in with them and see how they're doing. So I think that the sophistication of the predictive analytics is really what's made it easier for us to target our interventions and to keep an eye, particularly on students that might have fallen through the cracks before.
Terrific. That's great.
I have less of a question, more just a general comment that I appreciate you dividing up each of these strategies in like short term, like survive the pandemic versus that these things are going to have to be sustainable long term. So I appreciate you and your institutional colleagues there taking a long term focus on things as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think sustainability for a lot of this is key, since even looking at the graphs, you can see how these things can shift right from year to year. So we need to make sure that we are paying attention to several years out as well.
Ball State was one of the first universities to kind of just do away with the ACT and SAT scores as a key factor of admission. Has that had what impact, or how has that fared? What's your assessment of that?
I think we're finding that those students are also experiencing a bit of an opportunity gap. That population of students is at an intersection. Many of those students are first generation students, or they come from low income backgrounds or different challenges. And so we're still looking at that data to try to understand exactly how we can support those students as well. The difference hasn't been significant, and I don't have the data off the top of my head, but we are seeing a slight gap that we're going to be monitoring as we move forward. And we're going to try to disaggregate that by population to make sure we understand where the populations are falling across the board.
Mm-hmm. Great. Good. The floor is open for other questions or comments. All right, I don't hear any. So Dr. Rivera Mills, thank you very much. That really, congratulations on really moving the dial on your retention. And obviously that has a great impact on enrollment. So thank you very much for sharing the things that you have been doing and have been working well for you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
All right, let's move on now to our next agenda item, and that's some of our outreach updates and some of the things we've been doing there. And Jared Wilson is going to share some of the initiatives that the commission has been doing on that front. So Jared, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Mike. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, I'm going to share my screen here. We've got a few exciting updates from, I think a few of these we've talked about over the past few months. It seems like it was forever ago when we talked about it back in June, but you know, this year keeps dragging on, I feel like. So, but we're excited to give, for the first one, an update of the what kind of happened with the summer COVID support grants. If you remember back in May, late May, early June, we sent out a call for proposals for specifically schools and community partners to apply for some funding. We had about $130,000 remaining in our Gear Up budget that we were able to grant as funds to help combat the end of school year learning slump that a lot of high school seniors specifically were facing because of the sudden and abrupt stop of being in in-person classes. So we had 11 grants that we were able to fund with that $130,000. We did grant the full amount out after we got all of the receipts and everything back. We spent about $6,000 over those 11 different grants that we gave to universities and community partners, and they really spanned the gamut, really, of everything from direct tutoring services to year kind of summer kind of bridge or camp type programs, to one of the community partners that we granted had a college readiness 1-day activity program that they had about 77 students attend. It was at I think it was at the Railcat Stadium up in Indiana. And so they were we really just said, hey, we have these funds, whatever you think is going to be best for the students in your area to be able to make sure that you're getting them as ready for their first year of college as possible. And I think we had like I said, we had a really, really great turnout with the number of grants that we funded. And I think the most exciting part was we were able to serve more than 1,500 students. We still have a couple of reports that are coming in, but based on the 9 that we have fully completed, it was a little over 1,500. And so we're pretty confident that with the last 2 reports that we're going to receive, we'll have some, that number will go up to 1,600 or 1,700. So very, very excited about what happened there. We are looking into kind of what's happening the rest of this academic year and seeing if there's a potential that we may have some additional funds at the end of this Gear Up grant cycle to be able to do something similar. No promises yet, but I think that as we look at our kind of projections of the amount of the money that we're spending on the grant, there's a strong likelihood that we'll be able to do something similar as we look into the end of this academic year and into the summer of 2021, which is wild that we're already thinking about that as well. Yes.
Jared, it's Teresa. I wanted to weigh in a little bit on this. I don't know if you saw this, but a study came out this week from Stanford, and actually they looked at 19 states, of which Indiana was one of them. The study showed that the learning loss is chilling in other states. An average student in Indiana may have lost the equivalent of more than 1 year of learning during the first months after school buildings closed, it said. The 19-state study found that the average student lost between 57 to 183 days of learning in reading, and from 136 to 232 days of learning in math. But in Indiana, where a school year is 180 days, the learning loss was higher than the average. And so, I know I sent this to some people. I'm not sure who all received it, but it's, they project that the learning loss, similar to the academic decline notice. We used to talk a lot about summer slide or summer melt. Well, they're talking a lot about this. It's very disturbing. So I don't know. Obviously, the small amount of money that we have can jumpstart some very important projects. But this really means that some of this loss is obviously within the K-12 sector itself, but it's the difference between math from 4th to 5th grade, for example. So this is not all the impact of going from high school to college, but it does speak to what I heard. I was not able to join the whole presentation before, but this commitment to identifying where students are when you accept them. And without SAT or ACT, and obviously this is a movement that's happening at more and more institutions. So we're going to have to find a way to identify where these students are when they start, and hopefully earlier using this. I know it's Jared, many of them use summer time to do things, but this is not done. I mean, we have not solved this problem at all. And in fact, many people are referring to this as the lost cohort. I mean, it's going to take us, and we don't even know yet how to measure the loss. So I'll make sure that Liz shares this study, the Stanford study, with those of you who are on the committee, because I think it does inform our work going forward and our work with our partner schools.
Definitely. And I think just piggybacking off of what you just said there, Teresa, I think that as we look into the ability, I think we have a good base for what these grants were able to do last summer, but I think there's a lot of expansion that we can do as we look at the funds that we have available toward the end of this year. So I'm not excited about the results of that study, but I'm interested in how we can help to mitigate some of those issues that we're seeing there. In addition to kind of on the same grant theme, we also were able to provide each fall and then we have a spring summer cycle of school and community partners across the state. This is another grant fund that we have from Gear Up dollars that we received from the larger Gear Up program, and each of these grant cycles, we have about $80,000 that we're able to award, somewhere between 80 and 90, depending on the time period. But we just released the programs that we are granting for this fall school and community partner grants. First of all, we focus on 3 specific things. The first one is most importantly, because of the grant that we have, or because of the Gear Up grant, the 21st Century Scholar Program, which focuses on 21st Century Scholar High School Scholar Success Program completion and maintaining academic eligibility for the program. The second thing that people can apply for grant funds for is increasing family engagement programming, which includes 21st Century Scholar enrollment and next level jobs promotion. And then the last thing that they can apply for is pre-college or post-secondary equity focused programming to help close the achievement gap in Indiana. And so we're giving out 13 grants to the community partners and schools. They've been notified of these and they're currently working on their programs. And so in early January, we'll have an update 13 grants and the activities that they were able to provide with the funding. We did give out nearly $84,000 in awards for that specific grant as well. So the really good thing about the Gear Up program is we were able to be funded again at the same level that we were funded at last year, which helps us to, there were no budget cuts. And so we're able to utilize these funds to help in those areas where we might have seen cuts in other places. And so this is just another example of what the Gear Up program dollars are doing currently. And hopefully, as we look again into the future, we can continue to use some of these funds to not just offset that learning slump, but also making sure that nothing else is falling between the cracks if we see any issues with funding and things like that.
Are we able to fund pretty much all those applications that were submitted, or is it a pretty competitive process?
Generally, we are able to fund most of them. What we to do is we'll look at all of the programs. If they fit within the guidelines and what we're actually able to fund, then we'll look at the amount of money that they're requesting, and we'll see which pieces of their requested funds we are kind of most pertinent as we believe most pertinent. And so, for example, if a grant is requesting for $3,000 for food, for example, we may say, okay, we can provide you all of your fund except for the $3,000 because we want to make sure that the grant dollars get as stretched out as possible. And that's actually for both of them. And so we have we've worked really closely with the different programs that we do grant. We have some obviously that continue to apply for the grant each cycle. We have some new ones each cycle, but we work really closely with them to make sure that we are able to provide them what's going to still meet the needs and still be allow us to be able to spend as much of the grant funds as possible on as many different opportunities as possible as well.
Okay, thank you, Jared.
Yeah. If you didn't know, October 1st of this year was the kickoff for the 2021-2022 FAFSA. So the application became available on August 1st. Our due date for the state is April 15th of 2021. We are currently about 2.5, 3 weeks into it. We're getting data from the federal processor. It's finally up and running. We haven't received data this week yet to actually post on our public Tableau that we have. If anybody would like to link to the link to this public Tableau, we can throw it in the chat here. But because we just started, not a lot of updates on what's happening with FAFSA yet. Our outreach team is out there hitting it really hard. Our Scholar Corps program, our Scholar Corps AmeriCorps members are out there making sure that the current college students are completing the FAFSA on time. But FAFSA is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And it feels like as soon as April 15th hits, then we start planning on how we're going to hit October 1st. I will say we are a little bit under where we have been in years past. We are attributing a lot of that to obviously COVID, but it's very, very slightly under. And it's hard to really track because we are only 3 weeks in. And so in a couple of months, we'll start seeing if we are under or if we're keeping up with where we've been in years past. One big event that I think is going to help us fill that gap is actually coming this Sunday. It's College Goals Sunday. This is it happens twice a year. There's one in the fall and one in the spring to help make sure that students are working with people who know how to complete the FAFSA. And so it'll be completely virtual this year, which will be an interesting change to what it's been in the past. But we're hoping that students will be able to connect with FAFSA professionals, individuals from college campuses. All of our outreach team, outreach coordinators are actually going to be participating in it this Sunday as well, just to make sure that we're getting as many students completing the FAFSA as early as possible. So after that, hopefully we'll have a bump on those numbers, and we'll be on track to hit or exceed what we got last year. And then finally, the last thing that I want to talk about is the Student Advocates Conference. It is coming up. We have received funding from Strata Education Network to put this on. We just found out officially about funding a couple weeks ago. So the ground running, getting planning started. But the Student Advocates Conference will be this December 14th through 16th. We're doing 3 half days, and it will be virtual. We're currently finalizing which platform we'll be using for the conference. Calls for proposals are open currently, and we're looking for proposals that fit the theme of innovation, today's higher education imperative. So we're really focusing on higher education needs to continue to innovate and change in order to continue being a thing, really. And so we'll be focusing on that as our overarching theme. And then we'll have 3 prongs that we're looking for calls or for proposals in, which would be completion, equity, and talent. And if you have read the strategic plan several times, that might make a connection, because the completion, equity, and talent are the 3 kind of prongs that we're focusing on in our strategic plan as well. We have a few tentative keynote speakers that we're working on right now to get on the docket. So Tim Rennick, who we heard back in, I believe it was March or April at the last in-person commission meeting we had at IUPUI, talked about equity, and diversity. Agree, speak for us. We just got that confirmation yesterday. We're holding off on what day we're actually scheduling him for, though, until we're able to hear back from Governor Holcomb and Evan Bayh, because they are 2 of the other keynote speakers that we're looking for. The last piece of this is we will be sending out the Stan Jones grant, which we've done every year for the past 3 or 4 years. We have up to $10,000 to give out in a grant for innovative practices across the state. We're hoping to either give 2 $5,000 grants or one $10,000 grant for that. And we're specifically focusing, because we're in the 30th anniversary of the 21st Century Scholarship, we're specifically focusing that on the 21st Century Scholarship. So the grant will be written around innovative practices to help with 21st Century Scholar retention, completion, success on college campuses. I believe that Liz sent out the email yesterday for the save the date and the call for proposals for this. Once we have the registration link, we'll make sure that everybody has access to that as well. I'm excited because it is going to be a virtual conference. I believe that we're going to have more attendees than we've ever been able to have in attendance before, which is, I think it's really exciting. And for example, Tim to come and speak without him having to come to Indiana is just an exciting piece as well. So, and it just opens up the possibilities for a lot more calls for proposals, or proposals that we'll receive, but also just the amount of individuals that we can have on, participating in the conference. So, does anybody have any questions about anything that I've just gone through?
That's great stuff, Jared, and I agree. I think it's exciting to have the Student Advocates Conference as a virtual conference this year. I think that really does create some great opportunities for us, and look forward to really even broader appeal and broader participation. That's neat. Well, great work on a lot of different fronts, and gosh, we're being aggressive in doing that outreach. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Likewise, reaching out to our educators and ensuring they are prepared is another key thing, and we've been doing a lot of work on that front as well too. And I was particularly interested in seeing some of the survey results here from the educators. But Shannon Elward is going to give us some more information and talk about our initiatives along that front. So, Shannon, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
Got it.
All right. So to sort of kick things off, we are creating a educator guide that will go out toward the middle of this academic year. The educator guide is being created as a part of Reaching Higher in a State of Change implementation. So in Reaching Higher in a State of Change, we call that we will ourselves create a communications toolkit every year to support outreach, advocacy, and constituent services. This first iteration of the communications toolkit is being targeted at predominantly high school, but middle and high school educators and counselors, although future iterations will be targeted at alternative populations that will be decided on down the road. Like I mentioned, we have a goal of distributing it toward the middle of the academic year. So we're in the content creation phase right now with a goal of distributing to schools early to mid-December. We really want to make sure we get that out before winter break, with the hope that schools and counselors will be able to use winter break to review the materials and implement some of the ideas and strategies then in the spring semester. So before we started content creation, we created and distributed a very brief school counselor survey. We had almost 80 school counselors respond to a short survey. These were all mostly high school counselors, but there were some middle school counselors in there as well. One of the key findings I think that was really interesting and pretty good to hear was that school counselors report spending 10 to 25% of their time on college and career readiness. 10% might sound low, but up to a quarter of their time being spent on college and career readiness with their students, especially considering all of the other hats they juggle, seemed pretty positive. One of the questions we asked was to have school counselors rank in a series of 3 what resources and what they ranked as the highest. In that question, we had 50% or just over 50% of respondents indicated that they really needed resources to help students understand the future of work as their highest priority and highest need. We thought that was really interesting. And then another 25% of them indicated that they needed additional resources to help students understand all of their options for education and training after high school as their highest need. So understanding that, those were sort of the 2 key topics among many other topics that we wanted to make sure we were including in the educator guide to indicate sort of what topics are most relevant to their work. And you'll see those on the screen. Those were all ones, this was a select multiple options questions. So these were all ones that over 50% of respondents indicated as most relevant, with college and career knowledge and exploration being at the top of the list. Student mental health was right up there, unsurprising given the pandemic and what's going on right now. We additionally asked respondents to indicate what they needed basically to know more about, what resources they needed to know about. Non-degree credentials was the #1 item on that list. So that's definitely a topic that we're going to be covering in there. CTE pathways is another piece that was on that. We were really excited to be working with the Governor's Workforce Cabinet on a CTE guidebook. And so we'll be able to include some of the information from that guidebook in this educator guide and really cross-reference between those two materials. One quick note before we move into what we're actually doing with the educator guide. We asked counselors in the survey to consider these topics separate of COVID-19, but we did ask them at the end of the survey how COVID-19 has changed their job and their counseling priorities. These were some really interesting responses. We got a lot of really heartfelt responses about, being really worried about their students and how this has changed their jobs. So I put some really telling ones up here, but we're hearing, that school counselors are doing just so much more virtual advising. They're having a harder time reaching students because of that. The second one here that, college reps are not coming into the schools nearly as much because of COVID. And so they're a little concerned about if that'll affect the percentage of students going to college. We know that our college reps are doing a great job with virtual visits and stuff like that. So we're hopeful that those efforts are gonna, really keep that college going rate high. Mental health is a huge thing right now. They're working a lot more with their students on those mental health issues as a result of the pandemic. So we know that that's a big concern. And then we thought that this was particularly interested that these middle school and high school students are worried about the economic impact of the virus and what it's going to look like when they're out of high school and out of college. And I know we've, thought a lot about the economic impact on adults and college students, but it's really telling to know that these younger students are thinking about this as well. So with all of that in mind, we came up with a content outline for the educator guide. So I'm going to basically break it down into 4 categories, and I'll walk you through kind of what we're going to include in those. So we're going to start the educator guide with a section called the future of learning. This is going to include a lot of different things. Articles like information about all post-high school options, so 4-year degrees all the way down to certificates, credentials, certifications, apprenticeships, and everything like that. Exploring non-degree options and talking about what those are, talking about how counselors can help students to ensure that if they are going for a non-degree option, that that's a credible option, that that's going to be a high quality option for them. Lifelong learning and helping students to understand what lifelong learning is, why it's going to be important to them. We're going to have some information about early college credit, especially reminding counselors to make sure that as they're guiding students into early college credits, that they are guiding students in a way that the credits that they're earning are going to be applicable in the future. We'll have some information in there about CTE pathways and graduation pathways. Particularly with these two, we're working pretty heavily with the GWC and DOE to make sure that the information that we're including in there is 100% accurate and up to date, and we're really glad to be partnering with them on that information. Then we'll move into the future of work. This is really going to be talking to students about what work is going to be like when they graduate high school and college. We're going to include some industry spotlights in there, in particular looking at some of the Indiana. We're going to include employability skills, in particular what skills are going to be relevant, especially some of those technological skills that are becoming more and more important. We're also going to try and look at employability skills from the employer side. So looking at NACE and what their employers are talking about in terms of what employability skills are going to be most helpful. Remote work, remote learning, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention this at all. So just talking again about those technological skills and how some of those things are changing. Employer partnerships was a big one that schools were curious about. So we're really going to try and break down the importance of those and how they can reach out and create meaningful partnerships. And along with that, work-based learning and talking about all of the different options there. end with the future of Indiana. There will be a letter from Commissioner Lovers and Governor Holcomb introducing this book and talking to counselors pretty directly. That'll actually probably go in the beginning. We'll have some information in there about our strategic plan and the core goals, understanding that we're not going to get to these core goals without help from educators and counselors. There's a big section about equity, talking about how high school counselors and high school educators can help us to ensure equity among various populations. We're going to have a big section in there about all of our reports and the best practices and ways that they can use them as they're guiding and advising students through things. And then we'll have a small section at the end for key resources, different websites they can go to, potentially a glossary of terms for some of those terms, like what's a certificate versus a certification, some things that might be a little unclear to people at times. And there'll be a small student activity section in there as well. This is all being created digitally, so the student activities will be interactive PDFs. They'll be able to click through and fill things out on their device. So there's a short one, your college and career game plan, asking them to think through what they like to do, what they're good at, how they can match a career up with that. Predicting the future of work, taking it sort of one step further, what career are you interested in, prompting them to go to some websites to do some research on what that job might look like in 5 or 10 years. And then we have a lot of great video web content that our creative director has made. So we're inviting students to look through some particular videos to learn a bit more about various careers, various colleges, different things like that. And with that, I will ask if there are any questions.
That's great stuff, Shannon. Boy, there is a lot of stuff in there, and what a great resource this will be for the counselors and educators and students. So well done. Thank you. Feedback, questions? And again, I would just encourage all of our institution partners that as you have ideas and thoughts that you think would be helpful as well, please reach out to Shannon and share those with her as well. Anything we can do to enhance this or make it more valuable, a tool for you as institutions as well as those counselors back in the high schools. So please do so.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. And we'll definitely make this available once we send it out to all the colleges and universities as well.
Very good. Shannon, thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
Certainly, I mean, boy, does this, just looking at this agenda and the things we're covering here, and even what Liz is going to talk about, it's so focused on the strategic plan that we've laid out for ourselves. I mean, as I interact with a lot of organizations, it's rare that you could be this focused on your strategic plan as we are in all the things that we're doing here. So congratulate the team on being so focused. With that, Liz, let's talk about the Attainment Academy. And I know there've been a lot of things there, and there's a lot of stuff in this next section that you're going to share with us.
Thank you, Chairman Mike. Happy to share some new information about the Attainment Academy project, but also do a little bit of, I'll back up just a little bit and kind of refresh everyone on what that project was about and where we are today and how we plan to move forward with that. Shannon, I think I'll need you to release your screen share before I can.
Oops, sorry about that.
You're fine. You're all good.
So that, there we go.
There we go. Can people see my slides now?
Yes. Wonderful.
Okay. All right, so this will be familiar for those that would have participated in a previous meeting where I talked about the Attainment Academy project, but I did just want to, like I said, provide a little bit of a recap as to what this project was, especially for Pepper and Ann, who are new to the commission, but the Student Success Committee and all the work we have been doing with the Attainment Academy. So I do just want to kind of offer a refresher for everyone. So the Attainment Academy project was a partnership between the State Higher Education Officers Association, or SHEO, and Education Strategy Group, or ESG. They brought together 7 states to participate in a focused Attainment Academy, really laser focused on providing industry aligned post-secondary credential attainment action area and action items. We were really pleased to be a part of this. We've already learned that they plan to have a second cohort. So we were, as one of the original 7 states, it's pretty interesting. We think that with the second cohort, they might have us a 7 back as in some sort of advising capacity, which is pretty interesting. So this project launched in August of 19. I believe the first meeting was an in-person session, and a lot of great collaboration was built off of that. And then we very quickly had to pivot to virtual meetings for the rest of the project. But we were so pleased to be part of it and continue to be a part of it as we implement these strategies. But Commissioner Lover served as our team lead. We had some really great representation across our entire state leadership. And I'll say again that this project was really focused on being industry aligned. And you'll see here that we have representatives from education, from workforce, from our institutions of higher education, from our legislature. We have quite a variety of individuals here, all focused around the same goal, which is to help increase attainment in Indiana. So it was really great to have such a strong team with such a wide vision for our state's attainment. We did, over the course of the project, solidify 5 high-level priorities. Number 1 being to increase the number of post-secondary credentials, including our general core and our CTE courses awarded to high school students. So making sure high school students know their options and have the potential to leave high school with some sort of credential, making them employable right away should they need that, or better prepared to go on to more post-secondary education. Number 2, to increase FAFSA filing statewide. We have some pretty bold goals in there. Number 3, to increase the number of credentials awarded by our 2- and 4-year institutions. Just doubling down on our various initiatives. Like, I was really happy to hear from Ball State today about predictive analytics. That's something that we called for a lot in the Attainment Academy plan. So just more innovative, more data mining, more really understanding what's going on with our students and doing our best to provide interventions to help them succeed. So that's a lot of strategies under that bucket. Number 4, increase the number of adult workers pursuing and earning a post-secondary credential through some targeted outreach. We're already underway with this with our Rapid Recovery Initiative and doing direct outreach to Hoosiers across the state in need of support. So we are already trying to move the needle on that, and we'll continue to do so. And finally, ensure equitable and quality offerings for online teaching and instruction. This was actually something that we added a little bit toward the end, more in a response to the COVID pandemic. So we just want to make sure at all times that we are thinking forward, thinking ahead, to make sure that not only are we positioned now to help our students with online teaching and instruction, but we're setting ourselves up for a better future in that regard as well. So I'll just show you here on the screen. This is just an example of what one of the 5 priorities looks like. We have all the strategies, and they're broken down pretty specifically on the left-hand side. We have a lead organization or entity or state agency, however you label that. And we have collaborators as well. So we knew, and honestly, this was one of the hardest exercises for us was, all of us together, we came together, met often to decide what these action steps would be. And then it was choosing or trying to identify the right leadership versus collaborating roles to what entity is going to lead the charge in this work and actually rally the troops and really get everybody motivated to do this and actually see it through, versus those agencies or entities that would provide support in doing that. So you will see I did link the action plan to our website, so you'll be able to see all the various action items and how all of the roles broke down for that. But that was one of the harder parts of the exercise, was really thinking critically about who we needed at the table for these various initiatives. I do want to touch on, over the next couple slides here, the alignment that this project has to our strategic plan. Mike, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we've tried to be really intentional about our work and make sure that anything we are doing at the Commission for Higher Education is aligned to our strategic plan. And I think it goes without saying that the Attainment Academy work has a lot of alignment naturally, but some of these things I've highlighted here are almost directly pulled from our strategic plan. So I just want to highlight them real quickly here for you. Obviously, increase the number of post-secondary credentials awarded to high school students. That is a charge directly from our strategic plan. Expanding the pipeline of dual credit teachers. We'll continue to do that. We just recently announced a big expansion with InvestEd offering some funding there. So we're on our way doing good work in that space already. Increase FAFSA completion to high school. We are another strong partner in this work, offering targeted support and intrusive advising practices. One of the other reasons we wanted Ball State to come and speak today is really finding and highlighting those best practices happening at our campuses to continue to move the needle in that regard. Ensuring transferability between institutions and K-12 and post-secondary. Again, that's pulled right from our strategic plan. But I started because there are a lot of initiatives about in our action area focused on 2- and 4-year institutions for the transferability between those two types of institutions. So we are really zeroing in on those efforts. Obviously, we can't talk about attainment without reducing equity gaps. So that is absolutely incorporated in this. One of the things we specifically hope to do is by scaling our Scholar Success Program for all students and making that just, this is what all students should be doing. It's required for scholars, encouraged for all. So just that general concept to be taken to greater scale. Provide customized services for at-risk students. And again, we're talking about predictive analytics and looking at data and really digging in on what those barriers are for students and providing that wraparound service and support that they need. So that's definitely incorporated here. We do list in both of these plans have a defined credential of value. We actually, that was a big discussion in all of this. We had all the right people at the table for it too. We had obviously higher education. We have our 2- and 4-year partners, workforce development. That was a big discussion in all of this. We're moving ahead already with highlighting what we now believe are those credentials of value, those certificates that lead to high-paying jobs through our Next Level Jobs Workforce Ready grant. But we need to continue to review and refine what we mean by credential of value and really create an inventory and make sure that we are always adjusting that calculation and that we're doing that in a way that meets the needs of Hoosiers and our state. So we'll be taking a closer look at that as well. We want to identify credentials that obviously facilitate the rapid recovery to our economy. We, like in many ways, are already doing this with Next Level Jobs. So we'll keep that work moving forward. And finally, we'll investigate and address disparities in technology. This is definitely something called for in both plans, and it's become even more prevalent. It was already in our strategic plan, but it just, those barriers and issues have just been heightened in light of the pandemic. So that's not something we'll walk away from either. So just very quickly go over kind of our implementation steps for this. We do have myself and Mary Jane, we're going to be meeting tomorrow to talk about a strategic communications plan to really make sure we are thinking about how our state partners will come together to implement these strategies. Like I was saying in the beginning, how we want to be sure that, our leaders are well positioned to implement this, that, our collaborators are positioned to provide supports. How will this be realized with practitioners? This is a statewide, state leadership developed plan, but how does that actually look for our regional centers, our practitioners on the ground? So making sure we're thinking about how we can communicate this work and provide good implementation steps to actually move forward and see it realized. We do plan to bring the Attainment Academy Action Plan before the Policy Committee of the Governor's Workforce Cabinet. That'll be at the next meeting in November. And again, thinking through ways that this work aligns and supports the WIO estate plan that was developed. And it is it is our hope that we can bring the attainment plan before the governor's workforce cabinet, the full cabinet, for their endorsement in December. So those are the immediate action steps for us to provide some implementation for this, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, you provided some really substantive stuff there. I mean, that really is customized and overlays our strategic plan perfectly. In terms of our plan, the Indiana or the Attainment Academy for Indiana, how does it compare, and how will we interact with the other 6 states that are involved in the initiative?
It's a great question, Mike. I really do hope that ESG and CHIO bring us back, like I mentioned, in some capacity to be advisors for the next cohort of states that would be going through this exercise. It was really important to just on a routine basis bring together the members of those that serve on the Attainment Academy, which are already coming together in many other ways. I know that Teresa could probably say for herself how often she talks to Fred Payne now and President Ellspermann now. So those are definitely having all of those folks in the same room on a consistent basis to think through these big issues and priorities will be important. I know that is realized in a lot of ways through the governor's workforce cabinet efforts already, but we'll need to continue to think through how we as an Attainment Academy team continue to come together and just keep up that communication about things we're implementing across this plan. But my understanding is that CHIO and ESG hope to stay connected with us and make sure that they're providing that technical assistance should we need that. They are offering a number of webinars for us, and just as things came up across the Attainment Academy meetings and the meetings and those things, they found that, okay, these 4 of 7 states are experiencing this issue. Let's have a webinar series about it. So it's been really nice to have that resource to us as a state as well. For example, one of the topics that's been covered at some great length is the credentials of value issue. Many states are trying to wrap their head around that. So ESG set up a webinar series just for us as Attainment Academy states to tune in and learn more about that. So those types of resources have been really valuable.
Absolutely. That's great. Other questions or comments? Throw a question out there for the, okay, thank you, Liz. I think that any other thing, or Liz or Teresa, is anything you'd like to share with the Attainment Academy? I know you've been obviously extraordinarily engaged in that process, but anything you'd like to share or highlight? And she may have had to step out. So.
Out, yeah.
Okay, no problem. Then I'll just throw open discussion, and I guess one of the points, we're about halfway through the semester here. From the institutions, any feedback, observations, or takeaways, kind of key challenges that you've faced? I mean, obviously we know you've had major challenges, but any surprises that have come up since our last interactions, as we talked about a lot of the things you're doing to cope with the COVID? Any new kind of challenges or big danger signs or warning signs out there from anybody that might have anything to share?
Good. Okay. Well, Liz, I just wanted to send a thank you your way for sharing that, especially with Pepper and myself, as we kind of learn more and dig in a little bit deeper. That was very helpful just to get an understanding of what's been going on and kind of where we're advancing to as well with that. So thank you.
You're most welcome.
Well, the disadvantages of these kind of calls is I can't actually look directly at somebody and tell them you've got to say something, and the interactive activity during Teams meetings just isn't quite the same as in person. So I look forward to the date, hopefully sometime next year, that we'll be able to start meeting in person once again, and doing so safely. Again, I think just as I'm sure you're finding at all of your institutions and in your work, that direct interaction and collaboration in person is still such an extraordinary, valuable piece of what we do to achieve, superlative performance. So we'll look forward to that. Does anybody have anything else they'd like